the people stay. Extension of the cultural minimum. In Hungary, we have a law that every village has to have a minimum one person who educated to lead the culture in those even the very small village. But to do this, we needed more than 2,000 persons to educate, to have the opportunity to fulfill this wish. And during the pandemic period, we had the time and we had the possibilities to educate those 2,000 persons, of course, in the financing, with the financing of the government. Now we're ready with this program. So we have in every Hungarian 3,200 village, one person who lead the culture in the town or in the village. Ervin Lazar program. Since 2019, we have this primary school programs, which, regardless of special status and place of residence, encourage the cultural diversity. This means that more than 700,000 children could take part in some kind of artistic events in every year. In 2020, before the virus entered in Hungary, 355,000 pupils took part in the program, and they saw 11,000 performances. And what's happened in the pandemic time? Of course, we had to change all those programs to online. So the children stayed at home, opened the computers, and the theaters and the concert halls sent it through online version, the culture. But every Hungarian primary school pupils yearly once having a cultural events, even a puppet theater, a classical concert, a theater, or a circus performances. Kodály program. Since 2018, we spending a huge amount of public money to changing the musical instrument in the primary music schools. We achieved during the 2 years that refreshed and renewed the inventory of those music schools, and every student, every pupils who want to start to learn music have the opportunity to get a new instruments. Now, of course, in the pandemic period, this gave the opportunity to take those instruments home, and through online, those pupils can start to learn the music lectures with the teachers. And if we don't have those opportunities, of course, the students have to go to the school to share those instruments. But if we have lots of instruments, every student can take it home, and every student can do the rehearsals from at home from their own rooms. Hungarian melodies programs. Gypsy bands performing in Hungarian restaurants as tourist attractions. Of course, we have more than 200 gypsy bands who did not have the opportunity to work in the restaurants because all the restaurants been closed. We gave a support and we gave the salary for those gypsy musicians, because I believe that gypsy music is part of our culture. Sándor Csory program. A new traditional communities sprang up in settlement of Hungary and surrounding Hungarian language area, where local customs had already been forgotten, involving people of all generations. Spending 5 billion forint for the dance and folk art to supporting. And in the pandemic period, those support went on. Those small clubs and dance clubs and small civil groups received the foundations from the Hungarian government. They did not have to close the activities. They was able to preparing for the period when the COVID is going away. Government assistance 1 and 2. In 2020, the government provided approximately 5 billion Hungarian forint, approximately 14 million euro, in order to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic of the cultural and artistic sphere. The government compensated the state institutions, all the freelance artists and micro-sized cultural enterprise-ships, cultural workshops, the actors of the pop music and the pop music industry, technical experts working on the community cultural institutions. The role of culture in the time of pandemic. The cultural governments transmitted for the citizens well-balanced spiritual and intellectual munitions, pattern of behaviors even during the crisis situations. The government supports the cultural communities by continuous guidance and sharing the information, emphasizing the power of collaboration and sense of community. Other measures, the regular sectorial video conferences. Of course, all the video conferences grown up to a different level what was before. Temporary tax acceptation for small enterprises. The deadline of all state-funded programs and projects are extended. Support for outdoor music programs and the Thank You Hungary program, which pre-financed the future artistic productions of independent performers. We realized that the motor for a restart of community life after the pandemic must be the culture. After the free will of pandemic period, we can say that if we supporting the culture during the pandemic situation, then the preparing and producing and producing artistic values which can be well used after the pandemic situation and can restart the life after the pandemic. For this reason, we support all branches. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the statement of Minister of State for Culture. In the rest of our program, we will follow the order of the rotation system of the V4 presidencies. So the next statement is of the Slovak Republic, and I'd like to welcome Mrs. Vieira Leščáková, the State Secretary of the Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic, and we kindly ask her to take your presentation and share your thoughts.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to inform you about challenges and lessons learned in cultural and creative industry during the COVID-19 crisis in our country. The COVID-19 pandemic was a completely new situation for the Slovak Ministry of Culture in a variety of aspects, with the ministry having to respond flexibly to new challenges with it had never experienced before. The COVID-19 related challenges have ultimately taught us new lessons and helped kickstart work on system level changes too. The first major challenge was to identify the actual impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on cultural and creative industries, abbreviated CCI, where the ministry ran into the limits of available data. The Ministry of Culture uses a so-called Cultural and Creative Industry Satellite account compiled by the Statistical Office of the Slovak Republic in order to identify the size and economic power of the CCI sector. The account measures the number of people employed in the CCI sector by means of two criteria. First, economic activity in the CCI sector according to the SK and ACE classification, and creative occupation according to the ISCO classification. However, the CCI sector occupations take various forms of employment from employment contracts through the various types of self-employed gainful activities such as freelancing, liberal professions, work based on the author's contract, etc., while many creative professionals use their various combinations simultaneously. The real life experience has also shown that the use of NACE codes is often inconsistent. The codes used in various administrative sources differ, and the NACE codes assigned to CCI entities do not correspond with their main line of business in many cases. Using these different criteria, the total number of jobs in the CCI sector is then estimated to range from 40,000 to 66,000. According to the data obtained from yet another source, the 2018 tax returns, there were 27,000 business entities engaged in the CCI sector. Given such a broad range of available data, it was difficult to draw up conclusions and make predictions of the amount of aid needed. In order to gather the most recent data, the Ministry of Culture launched its own data survey into the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on CCI sector. Over 7,000 entities participated in the survey with the following results: 79 of legal persons, 71% of natural persons, and 74 on non-profit organizations and associations engaged in the CCI sector reported a reduction of 50% and more in their income compared to 2019, either due lockdowns or a significant decrease in demand. However, when interpreting this data, we should keep in mind that the questionnaire-based survey was probably completed mainly by those entities that had been hit by the pandemic more seriously, such as those involved in live event productions. Therefore, the ministry sought ways for a systematic and detailed collection of data on the number of people working in a CCI and took the following measures: legislative arrangements concerning the conditions for registration in the Professional Artist Register and establishment of a new other culture professional register, continuing the work of defining the status of an artist and preparing an organization of professional artists to be established by merging the existing artistic funds, and linking the support instruments to correct NACE codes specified in tax return forms. When setting the support mechanism, the ministry promptly responded by legislative amendments from which CCI entities could benefit instantly. Event organizers were permitted to prolong the validity of tickets already sold, and if a planned event was to be cancelled, they could withdraw from contracts penalty-free. Artist authors were relieved of the obligation to pay contributions of 2% of royalties to artistic funds. Grant funds also responded promptly, amending the conditions for grant recipients so that they could implement projects with a delay and/or cancel them completely without losing an entitlement to the funds for the cost already incurred. As far as the financial support is concerned, the ministry sought from the very beginning to make sure that the general support schemes also covered CCI professionals as much as possible. The first and the most extensive financial support scheme was launched by the Ministry of Labour, Family and Social Affairs in the form of subsidies provided to employers to retain employees. Some natural persons were also eligible for this form of assistance. However, individuals who had income from their business activities and were simultaneously paid by an employer had initially been excluded from eligible applicants under the scheme. The setup disfavored CCI professionals because their income is often a combination of earnings from both employment, so employment and self-employed activity. So it's a combined income. According to the data from tax returns, this had been true for nearly 50% of CCI professionals who worked under various types of employment, part-time, authors, freelance, and other contracts. Following intensive interministerial discussions, this eligibility requirement was amended, so then even people with a combined income, both from employment and self-employed activity, were eligible to apply for financial support. The CCI actors received a total of 51.7 million euro between March 2020 and June 2021 under this scheme. The CCI entities could also apply for aid in the form of subsidies for rent payments from another general financial support scheme administered by the Economy Ministry. Upon the Ministry of Culture interventions, non-profit organizations were also included among eligible applicants. No legal framework had been in place at the start of the pandemic with the Ministry of Culture itself could provide financial support to CCI actors to compensate them for and eliminate adverse effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. During the preparation of legislative amendments, the ministry made use of the infrastructure of the established grant funds to obtain financial resources for new calls specifically designed to provide aid in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. 9.1 million euro were allocated in the form of support in the second half of 2020 through extraordinary calls, creative stipends for individuals financed from Fond na podporu umenia, Art Support Fund, and Fond na podporu kultury národnostných menšín, Fund for the Support of Culture of National Minorities. Audiovisual Fund announced an extraordinary call to support the programming, visitors, and operation of movie theaters in Slovakia, through which nearly 540,000 euro was paid out, and a call to support distribution of audiovisual works under the financial support exceeding 600,000 euro was granted. The Ministry of Culture also provided support of its own organizations that had lost resources to fund their expenditures because their income had significantly decreased due to the pandemic measures. The ministry also took part in the initial negotiations to set up a grant call by the Economy Ministry for micro, small, and medium-sized businesses in cultural and creative industries. The support provided under this call amounted to 7.1 million euro. An important moment in this respect was the change of legislation that enabled the Ministry of Culture to directly provide subsidies in order to mitigate the adverse impact of the crisis on the cultural and creative sector. The ministry then prepared several COVID-specific calls. Firstly, aid for technical support professions, for example, sound engineers or cameramen, etc., with a combined income that had been excluded from the first round of general aid, more than 850,000 euros. Secondly, subsidies for non-profit organizations in the cultural sector, 5.9 million euro. And thirdly, subsidies for natural persons, CCI professionals, 3.4 million euro. The ministry is now launching another COVID-related call for subsidies for specific commercial companies in culture and creative industries. A positive aspect of this development that will have a longer lasting effect is that the new COVID-related calls for grants and subsidies have reduced administrative burden on applicants and facilitated digitalization on the application process. To sum it up, the following measures have been implemented in order to provide support to actors in the CCI sector. Legislative changes on subsidies provided by the Ministry of Culture on the basis of which targeted and COVID-specific calls have been announced for specific target groups in the CCI sector, prepared through a participatory procedure involving affected stakeholders. Cooperation between ministries in adjusting the general support mechanism and support schemes created by other ministries to include CCI entities. Development of communication web platform pomahamekulture.sk that serves as one-stop shop containing information on specific and general aid and support mechanism and schemes for various CCI stakeholders, individuals, business entities, and non-profit organizations. Several national projects focused on the digitalization of cultural heritage have recently been implemented in Slovakia. As a result, there is a quite large volume of digital cultural heritage content available for use, but the ways of providing access to the presenting the digital content need to be improved. The pandemic and remote schooling have highlighted the need for presentation of digital content. Some organizations under the Ministry of Culture were well prepared and able to offer quality digital content right away, such as, for example, the Slovak National Gallery, which launched the Webumania.sk platform, an online catalog containing more than 166,000 artworks from the collections of 17 galleries in Slovakia and the Czech Republic. Many institutional repositories and digital libraries responded promptly and offered digital presentations of their collections in various forms through their websites and social media. A good example in this regard in is the Slovak Philharmonic, which have been making video recordings of their concerts for more than 10 years, offering them as a video on demand via stream.philharmonia.sk website. Therefore, they had a rich video archive containing the performances of all of their ensembles, including organ concerts, educational and family concerts, the Bratislava Musical Festival performances, etc., readily available and were able to offer in online for free. In the first month following the outbreak of the pandemic, Národné osvetové centrum, a cultural organization under the Ministry of Culture, launched the Návstěvník.online website, an online platform for theaters, operas, dance companies to present recordings from their archives, as well as to stream their performances live. 13 entities are currently involved in this project, including theaters established both by the ministry and local authorities. The platform contains paid content, generating at least some revenues to cultural organization. The Klubtura Clubture project, with the allocation of 150,000 euro, was carried out to support the musical scene in Slovakia, involving a series of concerts of local musicians in music clubs across Slovakia, aired by public television. The COVID-19 pandemic had confronted the Slovak culture with several challenges, which the Ministry of Culture successfully resolved over time. It also inspired and/or sped up system-level changes whose benefits will be felt even after the pandemic is over. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for Mrs. Vera Leszczakova for this interesting statement on the experiences and the measures of the Slovak Republic. And now we'll turn to the Czech Republic, and we like to kindly ask Mr. Vladislav Oruda, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Culture of Czech Republic, responsible for management and cultural heritage and state-funded institutions. And we like to ask to take his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear.
Yeah, I apologize for some technical problems on our side. So, distinguished minister, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Minister of Culture, Mr. Lubomír Zaorálek, let me thank you for organizing this conference, which I consider to be extremely important. I am grateful for any opportunity to exchange experiences and information on how to proceed in this difficult time. And I welcome this platform as a platform that can inspire and help us all in our joint effort to return to normal. I'm very happy to share with you the experience and plans we have in the Czech Republic. Due to COVID-19, culture became one of the most affected areas, and the independent art sector was hit the hardest, as it is not linked to public funding in a stable way. Most independent sector workers in Czechia are not really employed. These workers depend on the number of organized events, and in the past 2 years, there was a huge risk that this whole social group would be left completely without income and other resources. Therefore, the government has approved the COVID Culture Aid designed for the professionals in arts and art technology, the self-employed, who were able to receive a lump payment of 60,000 Czech crowns. Since the spring 2020, the Ministry of Culture itself adopted a package approved by the government in the total amount of 1.07 billion Czech crowns in order to preserve the culture infrastructure in the Czech Republic, and thus also tools to minimize the effect of the pandemic. The Ministry of Culture has also prepared its own measures to mitigate the impact of pandemic on the cultural sector. The main goal was to maintain the professional non-profit culture infrastructure as it has no financial reserves. The total amount assigned to this program was almost 43 million euros. The current crisis has hit the whole culture and creative sector hard. In its proposal for Next Generations EU, the European Commission states that the culture and creative ecosystem is likely to fall sharply, up to 70% in the second quartile of 2020. The effects of the crisis will be felt in the culture and creative sectors in the coming years, also due to the decline in tourism. Both areas are an essential element of regional development. The cultural and creative sector is not a homogeneous sector. Some of its parts are mainly profit-oriented, while others focus on the creation of artistic and social values. The use of digitization on related digital skills also varies greatly. The effects of the crisis are thus not evenly distributed within the sector. Admission-based subsectors have been hit the hardest, while areas related to the digital economy, such as game development, have even grown in some cases. The vast majority of the cultural sector is based on individuals and micro enterprises with less than 10 employees. who are generally most affected by the effects of the crisis. Wider rescue packages are often unsuitable for business models and non-standard forms of employment. Traditionally, actors in the Czech CCI are also vulnerable due to limited access to investment capital, dependence on the cooperation of many actors, low capacity in the field of internationalization or systematic skills development. Contributory organizations are then dependent on public funding, which is limited during the crisis. However, together with non-governmental, non-profit organizations, they form the backbone of the creative ecosystem, which provides innovation for the entire sector. In addition to short-term rescue programs, it's necessary to proceed with the long-term renewal of the culture and creative industries. At the same time, a modernization offensive needs to be launched so that the sector is able to absorb future shocks and is not so dependent on state compensation during the crisis. Last but not least, it's necessary to develop culture and creative industries, which represent one of the key areas for the transition of the Czech Republic to an economy with higher added value and lower energy intensity. Short-term rescue programs cannot provide total recovery. It's necessary to ensure the long-term renewal of the cultural and creative sector through the development of infrastructure and human capital. Investments are needed to increase the accessibility of culture and make better use of its innovative potential and to increase the sustainability of cultural infrastructure. A direct response to the crisis in the Czech Republic is the legislative reform introducing the status of artist. The aim is to create a more stable working environment in culture. Related investments will focus on skills, development, digital, economic, managerial, creative, and networking, including internationalization. The crisis caused by COVID-19 highlighted the need to modernize cultural institutions. The environment in which cultural actors will find themselves will change considerably after the crisis. In order for cultural actors as a part of the developing creative economy to be able to withstand global competition and at the same time make cultural content accessible to the citizens of Czech Republic. It's necessary to invest in the development of infrastructure, technologies, and skills. Thanks to the natural connection of culture with other sectors, especially tourism, and the support of smaller actors, investments will contribute to the development of regions. Last but not least, there will be an increase in capacity and environmental friendliness. In order to meet these and other goals, the Czech Republic has allocated a considerable amount of funding from the Next Generation EU European Recovery Plan to the development of the cultural and creative sector in the National Recovery Plan. This is a fundamental change in the approach to culture in the Czech Republic and taking into account its impact on society and the economy. Investments and reforms are divided into three main areas within the National Recovery Plan component of the Ministry Culture. 3.4 billion crowns will be invested in the development of the regional culture and creative sector. This funding for infrastructure is accompanied by support for the development of human capital and the renewal of pandemics of damaged networks for 800 million Czech crowns. It also includes a reform that will introduce the status of an artist and respond directly to the experience of ongoing pandemics. However, the investment of the Ministry of Culture will focus not only on renewal, but also on the long-term strengthening of the cultural and creative sector. A total of 1.76 billion Czech crowns will be invested in this area. Digitization of cultural content will help, for example, to make cultural heritage accessible and will help increase the availability of culture in our country. Technological modernization of cultural institutions then responds to the long-term problem of cultural infrastructure. Thanks to both initiatives, cultural institutions will be able to provide new and more efficient services. Last but not least, thanks to the National Recovery Plan initiatives, it's possible to fundamentally develop the culture and creative industries. Total investment will reach 1.38 billion Czech crowns. The reform of the Czech Film Fund will enable more effective support for audiovisual, including game development. The introduction of a creative voucher tool for SMEs will help innovative companies access the services of creative professionals and support applied research in the social sciences, humanities, and arts. They will provide innovation for the development of the cultural and creative sector, but also for increasing social resilience. Although the pandemic has hit the cultural and creative sectors hard around the world, I'm convinced that the National Recovery Plan will give Czech culture a chance to develop and strengthen in the years to come. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Now yes. Now yes.
Okay, thank you very much for Mr. Aruda for his statement on the experiences and the measures in the Czech Republic. And now we turn to Poland, and at last but not least, I kindly ask Jaroslav Selin, Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Culture, National Heritage and Sports of Poland, to take your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks to Hungarian friends, Hungarian presidency to organizing this conference and for your invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, in spring 2020, the whole world was surprised by the fast spread of the COVID-19 pandemic that brought severe consequences, including long months of lockdown and many restrictions in all areas of life, including cultural and creative sector. Nevertheless, it is also necessary to mention that during these challenging times, it is culture that brings us much needed optimism and gives hope for the return to normality. That's why the culture should be supported. especially in the times of COVID-19 pandemics when the needs are bigger. Immediately after the announcement of restrictions on the activities of cultural institutions in connection with the epidemic threat, the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage of Poland began working on solutions to compensate for losses related to suspension of activities in the cultural sector. The aims of the activities were, firstly, to secure the artists and employees of the cultural sector in Poland during the difficult times with financial support and law acts. Secondly, to continue artistic activities and develop new ones based on new technologies with grants program. Thirdly, to implement of most flexible legal and organizational conditions and environment for the activities of the cultural sector. Fourthly, as well as to minimize the damages caused by the pandemic crisis. Please allow me to present a briefly view in the some of the examples of activities of Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. We adopted 6 so-called anti-crisis shields with strong and wide state support for artists, employees of the cultural sector, as well as companies and non-governmental organizations dealing with culture, whose activities cannot be continued during the pandemic. An increase of funds for social assistance for artists and additional support for the development of new forms of sharing culture online were foreseen. The total value of support for the cultural sector in Poland in various forms may have reached a value of up to 1.4 billion euro. We increased also an amount of social aid for artists. 10 million euro allowed us to provide around 27,000 of social allowances. We also increased more than 3 times our budget of the Minister's scholarships program. With almost 3 million euro, we could fund 350 scholarships for artists. We launched a special fund for support of culture with an important goal to ensure the stable functioning of cultural institutions and to maintain the current employment in the cultural sector. More than 2,000 entities used the support and around 30,000 people were saved from being fired. In April 2020, we launched a special grants program called Culture Online, with a budget of 18 million euro and an aim to increase public access to cultural goods via the internet. As part of the scholarship program, we awarded more than 2,000 scholarships for individual artists for the amount of 4.4 million euro, and under the grant program, and more than 1,000 grants for the amount of 13.4 million euro for institutions. The program helped to prepare an enormous number on online presentation in various artistic activities. The budget of the Minister's grant programs to support the whole culture sector was increased in 2020 by 12 million euro, reaching a level of 86 million euro in total. This is the main source of funds or grants for the sector in Poland. There are around 30 various programs or areas. Thanks to this additional support, it was possible to organize 3,649 projects in the cultural sector. We are currently working on a Professional Artists' Rights Act. Let me please mention that this idea was the main subject of the discussion of the Ministers of Culture of V4 countries in April this year, during the Polish presidency in V4. The act civilizes the conditions of artistic work and provides the lowest earning artists with a minimum of social security in the form of access to social and health insurance. It is worth mentioning that the Polish cultural sector, despite all the difficulties, was very active during the pandemic, and we are very grateful for that. a nationwide survey among local government-operated cultural institutions made by the National Cultural Center in April 2020 ended up with a conclusion that more than 50% of cultural centers introduced new initiatives such as online courses, publication of archival materials, recordings and works of animators, employees, sharing the range of initiatives with other institutions. The contact between the cultural institutions and the interested persons was granted also in the lockdown time, but the medium changed. The digital library Polona, already in the first half of 2020, reached over 600,000 users. The National Museum in Warsaw in April 2020 noted 4 times more interest of a digitized collection than in February 2020. The museum organized 850 online museum lessons for over 9,000 students from 45 cities. And another example of the interest, Ninateka portal, offering movies, performances, online concerts, was visited by almost 1.5 million viewers, generating over 7 million views. This is a 10-fold increase compared to last year. Now people under condition of maintaining proper sanitary discipline can go to the museum or cinema or theater and have direct contact with art. But the openness of cultural institutions and the managers to digital activities, as well as the will of the audience for these activities, will remain with us for the next year. The above mentioned projects are only a small part of the efforts of combining the support appropriated by the Minister of Culture with the great engagement of artists and people of culture in Poland in the cultural sector in these challenging times. During this conference, some Polish cultural institutions and projects will be presented. For example, Zbigniew Raszewski Theatre Institute and the competition for the best online theatre productions, presentation of activities in Sinfonia Varsovia, digitalization in the libraries presented by the National Library in Warsaw. I believe that discussions and presentations we are going to witness during this conference will help us to make a synthetic analysis of the important cases and allow to develop a catalog of good practices that the V4 cultural sector can share with other European countries, providing a significant input in the cultural development in Europe. I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity and for the exchange of views on this important topic. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Selin, for your important sharing contribution to share the experiences and the measures taken in the Polish Republic. And all of the deputy ministers and secretaries, thank you very much for your participation in our conference and sharing their thoughts. And now we can continue our program with the keynote speech of this day. And I'd like to introduce to Csán Togay, the Chief Advisor of the European Capital of Culture of Hungary in 2023, the city of Veszprém and the Balaton region. And I kindly ask him to take their speech with the title, Can the Culture Go Green?
Thank you for the honor to giving me the burden of a keynote speech. And I will try to address, not as there has been lots of important points raised as far as COVID is concerned. Let me give you an introduction to a very concrete project of ours and the impact that COVID had on this project. I will hopefully successfully share my screen. Is it shared?
Shared, it's okay.
It's okay. Okay. So I if it's okay, then I start my speech. So thank you for the introduction. My name is János Dzsantogay. I'm the Chief Creative and Artistic Advisor of the European Capital of Culture, Veszprém Balaton 2023. Let me first very shortly, I know gentlemen you and ladies, you are quite, you know what is this format, the European Capital of Culture, but let me shortly introduce it. It was started by, according to the idea of Melina Mercouri, who was at the time in 1985 the culture minister of Greece, and she had this idea to present Europe through the culture of its cities, and she proposed to highlight the richness of European culture through the richness of European capitals. At the beginning, that was quite easy, so to say, because cities like Berlin and London and Paris could certainly show without any problem culture that are relevant to European culture. But then smaller cities later on, and that as decades have passed since, are certainly keen on showing this culture and to get some and to get European visibility. But on the other hand, this format permits them to think a little bit of, or not a little bit, but to think about how to shape their future with the means of culture. Veszprém, which is the city I'm working for and where I live nearby at the Balaton Lake, it is a city of 60,000 inhabitants and has already applied for the ECOC title for ECOC 2010, but it was Pécs who won at the time. But Veszprém did not give up, and they tried their luck again for the ECOC 2023 by joining with the region around Veszprém. That is the Bakony and the Balaton region, and some of you will certainly have heard about the Balaton region. The Bakony region is the mountainous region or hilly region around Veszprém, and Balaton is of course the most important lake in Central Europe, and very much important and the region very much important for Hungary. So this region joined in the bid, and it was a good idea of Veszprém because we won the title, and the work has started since. We will be the European Capital of Culture and the region in 2023. A bit of the region, I already told you some numbers of Veszprém and Balaton. Veszprém is 15 kilometers north of the lake. Balaton, it's a UNESCO City of Music. It has a long history. I would like to tell you about the history of Veszprém, but that is not the subject. Which is important for Veszprém and the Balaton is, of course, to find ways how to shape the region and how to keep young people in the region, how to give even more dynamics to the region, and of course the cooperation and the inclusion of the Balaton region that we call the place of national happiness sometimes, because it is really a region that we adore, we Hungarians adore, and that concerns all of us. Well, the inclusion of this region highlights the importance of the ECOC. This region, Balaton, is not only a region; it's a lifestyle. It's a way of living. It's a way of thinking, and it's a way how Veszprém towards the region. Veszprém turns towards this region with much affection. Our aim is in working, we just defined the aim to reposition the region as a creative cultural region with European visibility. And as to Veszprém and Balaton, I mentioned that already at the beginning of the century, the city mayors knew that the future of Veszprém lies, so to say, in the Balaton region. So this is to create a cultural creative region with an important hub of Veszprém, and to make it a home for creative industries is one of our big aims. And I think that this region is really predetermined to become an even more creative and cultural region that it is already now. It has everything that cultural industries sort of long for. It is a smooth region. It has good weather. It has a lifestyle it has a quality of life is high. It is very attractive, and you will see later how COVID sort of contributed to these characteristics. It is in these circumstances and under these preparational circumstances and the enthusiasm that the team had for preparing for 2023 that the COVID broke out. So everybody, I don't want to tell evidences, but sometimes we have to. Well, everybody was shocked, and we were shocked, and we didn't for the first moments how to react. We were looking for of course, the world went online. And let me a little bit complain as the sort of the advisor is that at the beginning, I was advising, so to say, the team that we should, so that is to say in 2018 already, we should develop an online platform of the European Capital of Culture, that is to say, to have real online events as well. The online dimension I considered as something very important. At this time, my colleagues said, well, we should have listened a little bit more to your advice, because now we would be sort of ahead of the others. But that's the fate of the prophets of their own team, so to say. So that was the moment when we, besides, of course, going online with all the work and homework, etc., I will not talk about too much. But we started to make actions and interventions, cultural interventions that used technologies that are, so to say, COVID compatible. Now you see one of the examples of one of the cultural artistic interventions that we had in Veszprém. That was on the day of the Hungarian culture, that is the 22nd of January. It's the birthday of the poet who wrote the Hungarian anthem, Kölcsei, and we made an installation, as you see, about his study where he wrote the anthem, and we projected it on the walls of Veszprém. You may see on this picture has been taken during COVID time. You can very much see an empty city in a sense, frightened by the pandemic. But the presence of art is something that gives liveliness even in these times of when there is this shock and this incomprehension of what is going on with us. And now the reaction to COVID of the Hungarian government was to declare, and this was quite a surprise for me, cinema production and cultural creative industries as priorities. to subsidies and to promotion. And I was surprised because I have to admit, as an artist and creative, that I was not very much accustomed to always relevant reactions of governments in general. But that was a very relevant reaction and it showed that the government was sort of prepared, at least as to the possible dimensions of something like what is going to be important in the future, and they reacted quite quickly. And with this with these stressing the priorities of culture and creative industries and cinema, that helped us a lot, because that was just the way we were sort of thinking how to manage the situation. I hope that with the eventual fading of the feeling of emergency, this horizon of action will not fade as well as far as the governments are concerned. The decision came handy for us because one of our flagship projects was to move the Hungarian Motion Picture Festival and to resettle it from Budapest in the region. Balatonfüred, Veszprém, and Balatonalmádi, and that has been already decided by the time of the COVID outbreak. But this has been because this has been a long-time wish of the Hungarian professionals to have this most important festival at not during winter time in Budapest, but during summertime on a more agreeable or more comfortable place like Balatonfüred at the shores of the lake, or like Veszprém, who has a sort of a history of festivals as well. So the festival became, through COVID, largely an open-air festival, and this is a very big advantage as to compare to Budapest with its classical indoor venues, and it has been a great success, and it fulfilled lots of functions compatible with our strategy goals to strengthen the brand of Hungarian cinema and to sort of to give a touch of creative cultural importance to the region, and to have the most important Hungarian film festival in the region is definitely a sign for elevating the region for culture and culture industries. The culture of open air was as well the aspect that was enforced by COVID, and of course Veszprém Balaton region is par excellence an open air region, if you want. And COVID motivated us to focus much more on the possibilities of non-urban contexts than previously intended, and which are of course much more present in this region than in other regions, even around mid-sized cities in Veszprém. And it underlined the utility of the importance of formats that we have already planned, such as cultural events and interventions of non-habitual locations. This is nothing new, of course, but the readiness of the audience to embrace these occasions and places has considerably grown due to the pandemic situation. And of course, this shift from the urban to the non-urban, from the closed to the open, has other consequences as well. Before I come to this, let me address another hot topic that even overboils due to the pandemic, and this is digital arts and immersive experiences. You may remember that I mentioned that the government's reaction was to stress the importance of culture and creative industries in the light of the pandemic. But this repositioned one of our flagship projects and propelled it into the top of the list of priorities. Let me introduce to you the immersive digital project CODE, Center of Digital Experience of Veszprém. This already is a project that is not so much during COVID, but the post-COVID restart, if you want, so, and the post-COVID transformation of culture. Veszprém plans to establish a significant digital immersive experience center by the time of the Capital of Culture, or at least it is it is preparing for it. What role can play an institution like this with new immersive technologies and genres for education, fine art, tourism, and the new virtual narratives in the post-COVID world? Let's have a little show for it. And these new immersive technologies redefine the relation between multimedia, art, dissemination of culture, new narratives, technological progress, education, and several hybrid formats. They allow to attract young people as audiences into the world of classical art, modern art. It facilitates education. Education, be it STEM, scientific or artistic education, and it ventures into new territories of culture as well, but not only culture, but as well technology, and the relation between art and technology. These, as you will see later on, are very, very important tools on the one hand, to establish a creative cultural region, to attract creative people into the region, to keep young people there, to heighten university education, and to include audiences into the new forms and new ways of culture. So I will continue, but parallelly to this code, we will have established a code lab that will be even more important than this very attractive culture institution. This code lab will look and explore for possibilities of digital arts, education, and technologies, a place that may propel Veszprém and the region, in this aspect at least, among cities who prepare with these kinds of institutions like Linz, Paris, New York, Tokyo. So this is, of course, a big dream for us. And the project gained its heightened priority as to the management of ECOC, paradoxically, due to the outbreak of the pandemic. The dialogue the merge, the synthesis of art and technology as defined through the planned activities of our code lab help us to invent and at least partly dictate future to shape the post-COVID condition of our societies. Now, coming back to the Balaton region, for example, is how much is too much? The development of the last decades contributed already to the rediscovery of this region, but and our strategies aim this rediscovery. But the drive caused to leave urban contexts by the pandemic had some other effects as well on the region, and sometimes casting a bit of shadows as well. We need to keep our youth in the region, and we need creative minds, but through the drive to leave the city, some settlements have already implemented the stop of new constructions, for example, at the lake. With the appearance of new stakeholders, the ecological burden of the region is growing. Everybody has its interests, from the smallest fish in the lake to the greatest investors at the lakeside. And COVID adds to this growing burden, but it directs as well our attention towards the question how to manage all these justified interests, how to raise the awareness as to the ecological fragility of our common treasure, the Balaton, our beloved precious place of leisure, creativity, tourism, work, and culture, our national happiness. Educate is to raise awareness. The way we handle these challenges might be exemplary for the whole country, I think. We have to find ways that include all the stakeholders. Nobody can be excluded. The lake is a mirror of our present, and it might very well foreshadow our future. So it is up to us how we shape it. In order to explore these questions, we directed our attention to this very complex socio-ecological and cultural system, and This is where how culture goes really green for us. Our Balatorium project became the Balatorium dealing with the ecological system of the Balaton with the language of art and culture became as well a flagship of our ECOC undertaking. Balatorium is basically a series of educational and cultural interventions, programs that aim to raise awareness of the fragility and the complexity of the lake and of the region. It is an ecological, ethical project. I have to stress the ethical part that aims to help the communication between the stakeholders and to understand each other's interests and to find a common ground in exploiting common interests and to raise the ecological ethics, the awareness of how much our environment is important and fragile and treasure for us. Our program is being developed in cooperation with scientific and social institutions and who are major players as far as the voice of the Balaton is concerned. And so it's on a basis of scientific research that we conduct with experts to build our program. It's not a romantic approach to nature, but an approach of relevance based on science. Art and nature are no longer a romantic relationship, but in a much more relevant relation, where art should explore the structures of nature in order to understand it and to raise consciousness of our being inseparably bound to each other. And it is through series of expert workshops that we have determined the main consensual topics of our actions for 2022, 2023. But of course, we hope that even after 2023, we will remain in touch and develop further this frame of synergetic interaction between ecology and culture, meaning art, technology, science, inclusion, and education. It is an extreme complexity, the ecosystem, and it's not only for artists. It is quite difficult to understand this complexity, but it is not so difficult to comprehend it through the emotional eye of art. We feel how important the ecosystem is for us, and there are no stakeholders who are not concerned by it, knowingly or unknowingly. Let me add something. Art can learn from nature and ecology, and again, science can learn from art. Biomimicry, if you know certainly the expression, is one of the great sources of human knowledge. It is through biomimicry that we have learned how to fly from birds, by observing them, or which means as well by painting them or drawing them. Nowadays, we may learn a lot from observing and artistically processing mechanisms and systems of ecological constructs or systems. That is much more than simply celebrating the beauty of all of it, although beauty can teach us a lot as well. And we can learn about society, about social actions. I think that it is much more, it is not only the question of fragility, but it's the question of how to learn from nature. And COVID is, in this sense, certainly a master as well. I will come back to that in a short. We are at the beginning of our journey, but we have already learned a lot, and we would like to share our knowledge through the complex program of Balatorium that aims as well on international cooperation as well with the Visegrad 4. Planned congresses are ahead for 2022 and 23. Our journey aims to go far. We have more and more partners on board, institutions of different national institutes, research centers, schools, universities. Here you see a workshop with the students of the University of Design, Moholy Nagy. And here some of the proposals of the students that are not yet fully in the depth of ecological understanding, but already show the love they have for nature and for our ecological surroundings. As you may have noticed, and you have understood, that the structural reaction to COVID, the challenges of a pandemic, overlap in a lot of aspects with the challenges of fragile ecosystems. There is not much room for antagonism or even conflicting approaches, even if they are necessary to any process, of course. Let us learn from COVID and from the ecosystem. As to our project of Balatorium, we are at the beginning, as I told, of our journey, but we already feel and experience the enthusiasm of those with whom we work together. So let's work together. We are very conscious about our responsibility of Balatorium. Balatorium is the laboratory for our national happiness and hopes for the future, with COVID or without COVID. Thank you for your attention. I don't hear anything. I don't hear you, Mr. Seke.
Okay.
Oh, it's okay.
It is the end of this lecture.
Yes,
Okay. You can 10 minutes to continue. Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Togay, for this interesting and fascinating lecture. And as a conclusion of the 5 lectures, we can draw a lesson that culture has an inevitable role in our life and in the mental health of humanity. And we can see that all the governments of the V4 countries realized and recognized this importance of culture, especially in time of pandemics. And for this reason, they decided to deal culture as a priority area. And on this conception, they manage the continuous supporting systems, the creating of the role of culture. Another lesson we can draw that culture always can find the creative ways, the ways to find the people in innovative solutions as well in such an extraordinary situation. So we thank you again this interesting lecture, and we wish full success for the programs of the ECOC 23. And now I'd like to share a technical information for the whole conference. For the afternoon session, you can join if you see the monitor and write down. You can find a breakout room, and you can choose the sessions for the afternoon presentations. All of the lecturers who are belongs to the one session, it is the A session. They can choose the A button for the A room, and the other part of the lecturers can choose the B button. So the join button, yes, it's happening. For your information, I can tell the lecturers of the A session: Andor Nagy, Tomás Gruszkowski, Ádám Vajk, Laura Csonka, Peter Jasek, Lilla Pető, Csilla Cakó Habi, Zsolt Márton Kis, Matus Binc, Zsuzsanna Fehér, Anna Cékmány, Adrien Ádám, István Bolcsó, Jirzsi Frank, Lajos Lakner, Magdolna Nagy, Adrien Nagy, Erzsébet Demeter Guba. So they are the lecturers of the A session of the afternoon panel, and the B session we can hear during the afternoon Szilveszter Ókovács, Ladislav Brühl, Szabolcs Szamosi, Ivica Gabrisová, David Marecek, Janusz Marinovski, Martina von Nieland, Veronika Varga, Olga Szopkovics, Mónika Durst, Blanka Hirman, István Andrészek, Ádám Berzsenyi Bellág, Michael Kroff, Katalin Lotz, Miklós Jenővári, Olga Václavkova, and so they are the lecturers of the B sessions. And during the afternoon, now we can a 10 minutes break, and will be another break during the afternoon. And we will continue the program of the conference 11:45. And I'd like to express my gratitude for the lecturers from these sessions, and thank you very much for your participation and attention.
Thank you.